All right, doing another Emotions and Faith live Facebook Live Q&A. I'm going to just take a moment to get the link from this so that I can share it out on another feed. Want to be able to get this in front of the most people possible. I'm going to answer a couple key questions, important questions about emotions and faith. I'm just posting this link right now. The question that we're going to address today, can we control our emotions? It's a big question. It's a question I as a parent deal with my kids all the time. All right, we got that shared over there, and now I'm back. All right, so it's the afternoon. I was expecting to do this in the morning, but unexpected things happened, and I ended up with a sick son at home, and I've been doing nursing duties all day. And so here we are at an unexpected time. I'm doing a series of Facebook Lives this month, probably 6 or 7 of them over the course of 6 weeks, because I want to talk about emotions and faith, because I have a book that has been out on the shelves for a while, and the audiobook version is coming out shortly. And so I want to talk about key questions that people are asking about emotions and faith. So in order to make this less awkward, because for me, the whole book promotional process is awkward, I am doing what I'm good at. And one of the things I'm good at is explaining. I'm an explainer by nature. I love to share opinions and break things down in ways that make sense for people. And so that's what I'm doing, taking questions that people have submitted to me via email, some of them on my Facebook page, about the topic of emotions and faith, and talking a little bit about what I've learned in the process of my own journey and in writing the book, The Wisdom of Your Heart. So today I'm going to address 2 questions that are very similar, 2 similar questions. The first question is from Jamie Curtis, who asked, how can I deal with a quick temper? Pretty common question, an important question for those of us that struggle with anger. How do I deal with a quick temper? And then Kim Collier-Clardy asked a very similar question. Her question was, how can we control our emotions when they're all over the place? And so those are both really great questions, and I think they're both getting at the same core issue. Right? We find ourselves in this very common experience. Hey, Shelly and Jacob and Chad, nice to see you watching along. Awesome. If you have further comments or questions, put them there in the comments, and I'll do my best to pay attention. These 2 questions, how can I deal with a quick temper, and how can we control our emotions when they're all over the place? These questions are about this core experience that we have as human beings, where we're living our life and something happens and we experience this overwhelming burst of emotional energy. Maybe it's from anger or fear, or maybe it's a wave of sadness, or maybe it's a positive emotion like a burst of enthusiasm. We feel that in our bodies and in our minds, and all that energy has to go somewhere, and we react. And many times, especially when it's a hard or heavy emotion, anger or fear, the reaction that sort of bursts out of us isn't always our best choice, right? That's why we ask the question, how can I deal with a quick temper, or how can we control our emotions when they're all over the place? So, would life be better if we could just control our emotions? Well, I have bad news for you, and then I have some worse news for you, and then I have some great news, I think. The bad news first. I don't think you can control your emotions. Hang with me for a couple minutes here. I'm not saying that you have permission to just, burst out with an emotional reaction, punch your fist through the wall, or scream at somebody that's in your way, or, some kind of outward manifestation of emotional reactivity. I'm not saying that. I'm not saying that our best self is when we just overreact with all that emotional energy and dump it out on the people around us. I'm not saying that. I am saying that emotions are actually not the thing you need to control. More on that in a minute. But here's why I say that. See, as I've learned about emotions and what happens in the body and the brain when we have an emotional reaction, what I've learned is that emotions are just something that happens. They are automatic responses located in your body and your mind, in your neurobiology and brain chemistry, and connected to your memories and the experiences that you've had in life that give you an interpretation of what's happening. And those emotions, largely, they just happen. There's some trigger in your world, and that trigger is either in your outer circumstances or in your inner perception of your outer circumstances. That trigger happens. Maybe someone violates you, or maybe you see something that reminds you of something that happened in your past. That trigger happens, and if your emotional system isn't compromised in some way, then you respond with the appropriate emotional response. So if the trigger is a violation, someone's threatening you or something's obstructing your will, and you feel that burst of emotional energy, you're feeling anger, because anger is the emotion you feel when you or someone you love or something you love has been violated. That just happens, right? Or maybe you lose something that's precious to you, or someone dies, or a significant other leaves you, and you're overwhelmed with that emotional energy, and that's sadness, right? That's the emotion we feel when we lose something that matters to us. You can't control having that emotional response. If you lose something that matters, you can't control whether you feel sadness or not. If you're violated, you can't control whether you feel anger or not. If you have an experience where you gain some positive benefit, you can't control feeling happy about that. Those are the emotional responses, and they just happen. Now, that's the bad news. Here's the worst news. You really don't want to put a lot of effort and energy into controlling your emotions. Now, I know that the initial question that I'm answering, how can I deal with a quick temper, is getting at this situation that we have where we have an emotional reaction that's destructive or hurtful to people around us, and we don't want to have that happen, right? We want to not lash out. And so I get that that's where we're headed. But what I want you to understand is we don't want to put a lot of energy into controlling our emotions. Because even if you are successful, I don't know that you can be super successful in controlling your emotional responses, but even if you are successful, it's going to cost you. Here's an illustration that was shared with me that helps, I think, articulate what I mean here. A friend of mine, Byron, who is a trauma therapist, describes the situation like this. He talks about drapes, curtains, the old living room drapes on the big living room window where you have the heavy drapes, and at one end there's the pull cord that you pull and the drapes draw closed. Okay, get that visual image in your mind. Big window looking out in the yard, drapes on either end. All right. Now, what happens in our emotional life when we don't want to feel something, so oftentimes when we don't want to feel pain or anger, is we begin to try and control that. So we pull those controls, and the drapes begin to close over the window. Right? So we're trying to limit the negative emotional energy that we're feeling. We draw the drapes over it. It's self-protective. And in some way it's natural, right? If you're being hurt and that's causing you to feel a lot of pain and anger, it's natural to not want to feel that as strongly. But here's what happens. When we begin to draw the drapes so that we don't feel the hurt or the anger or the pain, the drapes are being closed on both ends of the window. Right? You follow me? You pull the string over here, and the drapes, because they're connected up on the top, they begin to close on both sides. This is what happens in our emotional response system. When we begin to limit our capacity to feel pain or anger or frustration, the emotions we think of as negative, and we draw the drapes are also being drawn on the other end, which is the positive end of the scale. So if we limit our capacity to feel sadness or anger or hurt, we're also limiting our capacity to feel joy and happiness. And when we can get in that really bad emotional situation where we get the drapes closed so that there's just this tiny little narrow slot, this very narrow window out onto reality, which is just bland, non-emotional relationship to the world around us, where we've suppressed all of our emotions. Do you see what's happened with the curtains? Not only have I suppressed the painful emotions I'm feeling, but I am also suppressing the positive emotions. And so if I am able to control my emotional response system where I'm not getting those responses anymore, the cost is that I limit my capacity to feel at all. And that's what I experienced in my own personal life, that I had a lot of untended pain and a lot of untended grief. And because of that, I had a lot of untended anger. And I did stuff to try and manage that or hide from it or relabel it as spiritualized. And the less I was connected to those emotions, the fruit was, the less happy I was able to feel. And I got to this place where I was just limited to this very narrow, shallow, drab experience of the world. And so I don't think we really want to turn off our emotions or to control them. I think we want to do something different. Now, I think the process of emotional recovery and emotional healing is learning how to open those drapes so that you become open and available for all the kinds of emotions that happen in our mind and body, but then also maturing so that we know how to experience those emotions without them pushing us off the rails. And that is where we go to the real answer to the question, the good news. The original question was, how can I deal with a quick temper? Or that was Jamie Curtis's question, or Kim's question, how can we control our emotions when they're all over the place? Okay, so the bad news I suggest is you can't really control your emotions. Emotions are a response that happens autonomously inside our brain and bodies. And then I said, you don't even want to try to control your emotions, because the more we limit our capacity to feel pain, we also limit our capacity to feel happiness. We don't want to handicap ourselves in that way. But here's the good news. What we can control is our ability to sit with our emotions, to experience them and understand them, and then respond to them in ways that are constructive and positive, right? So Jamie's question, how do I deal with a quick temper? Well, the heart of that question is, something happens, I get triggered, I get really mad, and then I yell. Or I get triggered and I get really mad, and then I punish my kids in a way that is maybe excessive, right? And I don't want to do that anymore. How do I make that stop? Well, you're not going to make it stop by deciding you're not going to feel angry. You're going to deal with it by getting deeper in behind that anger. Right? We begin to learn how to experience the emotion in a way that is more mature. So let's talk about anger. For instance, in the last video I shared this. Anger is the emotion that we feel when in our own private logic we've been violated or threatened or obstructed. Right? So someone pulls in front of me in traffic and I get that little burst of righteous anger. Well, that's because by pulling in front of me in traffic, that's a threat, right? There could be a car accident. And it's also, honestly, a little bit of an attack on my sense of identity, right? Who's this person that thinks they can get in my way and impede my day and where it's heading? And so here, as we begin to mature, we begin to notice what's happening in our body. Oh, when I feel this certain way, I feel hot in my cheeks and my heart begins to beat. I know that that's anger coming up. So we begin to notice it. We begin to practice being present to an emotion without reacting. So I can feel angry without having to immediately lash out. I can notice that I'm feeling angry. I can be attentive to that. And instead of attacking the nearest thing, I can think about, am I being violated in this moment? Is that really what's happening? Is it true that this person is threatening my life? Is it possible that they're just in a rush and it has nothing to do with me? Is it possible that they've got cars lined up behind them and they're trying to get out of the way? Is it possible that I was driving too fast and wasn't paying attention, right? If I can hold off that reaction for a moment, I can begin to consider other possibilities. And when I consider other possibilities, I now have the ability to consider a response that's life-giving. So instead of feeling the reaction of anger and lashing out, that's the quick temper mechanism, instead of doing that, I can separate that initial trigger from my response, and I can think about, okay, how do I spend this energy in a way that's constructive? So if I'm in a conversation with my kid where they've really done something that's made me angry, I can feel the anger coming up in me. I can notice that that's what's happening. I can step out of the situation and go, hey, you know what? I'm pretty upset right now. I need to think about this for a minute. We're going to take a break. We'll come back and talk in 10 minutes. Go walk around the house, get my head clear about what really happened and how I want to react to it, and then come back and have the conversation. That narrative is the narrative of maturing in your emotional life, being able to sit with the emotion rather than take all that emotional energy and have to expend it immediately, right? I'm going to yell, I'm going to throw a fit, I'm going to do something to make you hurt. Those are all the reactions that are not life-giving. Those are the reactions that are not sustainable. When our Kim's question, how can we control our emotions when they're all over the place? All right, here's what I think about that question. Our emotions being all over the place is usually indicative that we are not sitting with them. We're not paying attention to what's really going on. Being all over the place means there's lots of stuff going on that we're not processing, right? And so part of the process of maturing in our emotions is to learn to be present, learning to stop, learning to listen, learning to pay attention to what's going on in our body, learning to pay attention to what's going on in the world around us, learning to ask clarifying questions so that we don't just assume that somebody meant something that we heard, rather than saying, hey, this is what I heard you say. Is that what you meant? And actually having that space between the trigger and the reaction here in the middle to stop and reflect. That's the process that we're heading towards. So I don't believe you can control your emotions. I think emotions are an autonomous response. I don't think you really want to control your emotions, because our ability to feel happiness and joy is a part of the same system that allows us to feel sadness and anger. And if you compress one side of that, you compress them both. But I do believe that we can grow in our ability to be present to our emotions, to understand what they mean, and then equipped with that information to make choices that respond in ways that are life-giving. That is the process, I think, of emotional maturity. All right, now I said at the very beginning, the reason I'm doing these videos is because it's a part of promoting my book. So 18 months ago, I should have had this right beside me. 18 months ago, this book came out, The Wisdom of Your Heart, on bookshelves at bookstores near you, Amazon, and all those other places. And now this month, in just a very short period of time, the audiobook version is coming out, which I'm so excited about, because I think there's a lot of people who listen to audiobooks who don't have the time to sit down and read, you know, fat books like this. So the audiobook is coming out. And so this is a part of getting knowledge about that out, so people know, so they can check it out. And because I hate promotion, I'm trying to do it in some ways that are fun for me, and this is one of those ways. So if you want to know more about your emotions and to grow in your ability to handle them better, pick up this book or pay attention to my feed, because very short order the audiobook is going to be released, and you can pick that up on Audible, iTunes, all those places. If you want to be reminded about when this is going to come out, you can head over to my website and subscribe to my email list, and I'll let you know as soon as it comes out. The email list goes out, emails go out about twice a month with links to blog posts and podcasts that I'm releasing about other intentional spiritual growth topics, and I will not sell or spam or anything like that content. So if you want to subscribe so that you can get that notification, just go to my website, www.marcalanschelske.com/sub. marcalanschelske.com/sub, and you can sign up there, and you'll get emails from me when I publish new podcasts and blogs about twice a month. And then I'll also let you know when the audiobook for The Wisdom of Your Heart goes live, which is going to be very, very soon. Well, thank you for hanging out with me for 15 minutes in this afternoon. I'm going to do another one of these Facebook Lives probably on Thursday, I think. And then there'll be some other things happening this week. In my feed, you're going to start seeing lots of pictures shared that have quotes about emotions and stuff. All of that is about promoting the book, because the audiobook is coming out. So thanks for hanging out. If you have more questions about emotions and our life of faith and how they work together, get those questions to me. Email them, leave them in the comments, private message me, because I'm going to be doing a couple of these Facebook Lives a week for a little while, and I'd love to answer questions that you have, so this can be helpful to you. Until next time, no matter what is up for you today or where you're at in the world, don't forget, you are loved, you are known, you are not alone. See you later.